It's 3 a.m. again. Not the kind of insomnia that comes from stress or too much caffeine, but the kind that feels spiritual, cellular, and almost impossible to explain. Your body is tired, but it won't let you rest, because something inside you is screaming in silence. And the hardest part is this: you don't just miss him in the normal way, you feel him like a frequency moving through your bones, like your heart is speaking a language your mouth never learned. Like the connection isn't emotional, it's involuntary. You try to tell yourself you're imagining it. You try to be logical. You try to shut it down. But in the dark, the truth rises anyway. Even in his silence, even in his absence, even as he runs, you sense that he feels it too. And that's where the pain becomes unbearable, because now it doesn't feel like love, it feels like a paradox. How can your soul recognize someone so deeply, while their behavior makes you feel forgotten? How do you explain a bond with someone who is not here? How do you make peace with a connection that exists in your spirit, but not in your life? So you stop explaining, you stop justifying, you stop trying to make it make sense, and you start wondering the most frightening question of all. What if this isn't romance? What if this is initiation? In today's message, we're going to name what most people can't put into words without romanticizing it, without shaming you for feeling it, and without turning it into a fantasy. Because this 3 a.m. awakening isn't just about missing him. It's about the way your nervous system, your intuition, and your soul are reacting to a connection that your mind cannot control. We're going to talk about why the divine feminine often feels the connection like a living current, and why it can feel like a blessing and a curse at the same time. What the dark night actually is in the twin flame journey, not drama, not punishment, but a spiritual and psychological collapse of old identity. Why his silence can feel louder than words, and how that silence triggers your mind to chase meaning, closure, and proof. The hidden shift that begins when you finally stop trying to understand him and start listening to what this pain is trying to awaken in you. This video is not here to convince you that he's coming back. It's here to help you understand what's happening inside you, so you stop questioning your sanity, stop carrying the connection alone, and stop confusing intensity with destiny. If you watch this all the way through, something inside you is going to settle, because you're going to realize the dark night isn't the end of love. It's the end of self-abandonment. This is the moment the divine feminine stops begging the connection to make sense and starts using the connection as a mirror. Not to punish him, not to erase him, not to win, but to come home to the part of you that has been left alone inside this bond for far too long. By the end of this video, you won't just feel seen, you'll feel clear. Clear about why your body keeps waking up. Clear about why your heart won't let this go the way a normal attachment would. Clear about why the recognition feels so undeniable, and yet why it cannot be your prison. And most importantly, you'll understand this truth at a deeper level. This is not about him coming back. This is about you coming back to yourself. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share will change the way you interpret the silence, the longing, and the entire spiritual purpose of this 3 a.m. awakening. This is the divine feminine's dark night, and it is also the doorway. Section 1. What the dark night really is. The dark night is not a punishment, and it is not proof that you failed. It is a sacred collapse, one that feels like an ending because it dismantles everything your nervous system once used to feel safe. But in truth, it is the most important beginning of your entire journey. This is the passage where love stops being a fantasy you can control and becomes a mirror you cannot escape. Because in the dark night, it's not just the relationship that changes, your identity changes. The version of you who survived by holding everything together, the one who tried to stay spiritual, stay calm, stay hopeful, stay strong, begins to dissolve. The old definitions of love, connection, destiny, and worth start to lose their meaning. And that can feel terrifying, because when the story breaks, the mind doesn't know what to hold on to. So the world goes quiet. Not because you are abandoned, but because your soul is no longer willing to be distracted. The darkness you feel isn't empty, it is intelligent. It strips away what was built on longing, on attachment, on chasing signs, on needing certainty. It removes the roles you played to stay connected: rescuer, healer, translator, emotional manager, until there is nothing left to perform. And when performance ends, what remains is truth. This is why the dark night often feels like you are dying. You are, but not in the dramatic sense, more in the holy sense. You are dying to who you were taught to be. You are dying to who you became in order to be loved. You are dying to the version of yourself that confused endurance with devotion. And this is what most people don't understand. The dark night is not the destruction of you, it is the return of you. Because underneath the grief, underneath the shaking, underneath the silence, something profound is happening. Your soul is reorganizing your entire inner world. Your attachments unravel so your essence can be revealed. Your heart breaks open, not to punish you, but to free you from the identity that could only exist through suffering. You are being emptied of what is not you, so you can finally be filled with what has always been true. And while you are breaking open in the shadows, he is beginning to wake up in his own. Not always in the way you want, not always with words or action or a sudden confession. But something shifts at the soul level when you enter this stage, because your dark night changes the field of the connection. The version of you who carried the emotional weight, who kept the bond alive through hope, who kept the door open through tolerance, that version begins to disappear. And when that happens, the structure he unconsciously relied on starts to collapse. Your dark night becomes an alarm clock not for his ego, but for his soul. It signals that the old dynamic cannot continue. It tells the deeper part of him, something real is happening now. Not romance, not intensity, not chasing, not pain disguised as purpose. Transformation. So if you recognize this ache, if you know the feeling of losing your old self, losing your old certainty, losing the person you used to be inside, love, don't label it as failure. Name it correctly. Claim it consciously. Write this in the comments and let it anchor into your body. I am transforming through this dark night. Say it even if you're shaking. Say it even if you don't fully believe it yet. Say it because your cells need a new instruction. And if these transmissions are speaking directly to the deepest parts of your soul, if you can feel that this is not just a message but a mirror, subscribe so you continue receiving guidance meant specifically for your journey. Because what follows is not theory. It is not motivational language. It is not spiritual entertainment. It is a map through the darkness you are walking right now. If you've made it this far, take a slow breath and really notice what's happening inside you, because the dark night doesn't just hurt, it reveals. It shows you what was real, what was coping, and what you're finally ready to release. Before we move into the next section, I want you to pause and reflect. What is the one belief about love or yourself that this season is breaking apart? If this message is speaking to you, tap like so I know you're here with me, and leave a comment sharing what you're realizing right now. Or if you don't have the words yet, simply type, I am transforming through this dark night. Section 2. The sacred collapse begins. This stage is not random suffering. It is not punishment from the universe. And it is not proof that you did something wrong. It is initiation. It is the moment the old way of holding love can no longer survive inside you. The moment your spirit stops negotiating with what your body has been carrying for far too long. This is the sacred collapse, when what was built on endurance, effort, and emotional overfunctioning begins to dissolve, not to destroy you, but to finally free you. Think of the caterpillar inside the cocoon. Before it becomes a butterfly, it doesn't simply upgrade. It dissolves completely. The form it once depended on breaks down so something entirely new can emerge. And that's why this phase feels so confusing, so tender, so disorienting. Because you are not just changing your mind, you are outgrowing a structure. You are releasing an identity, the one who always holds it together. And Divine Feminine, you cannot skip this stage. You cannot outthink it. You cannot manifest your way around it. You cannot rush the cocoon. You can only surrender and trust that the dissolution is making space for your wings. For months, maybe years, you have been holding this connection together with sheer force of will. You have been the light when the path went dark. You have been the anchor when everything felt unstable. You have been the one who believed even when he did not. You carried the emotional continuity. You stayed devoted to the meaning when the reality kept fluctuating. You translated every sign. You analyzed every synchronicity. You tried to read the universe like a map, hoping it would finally tell you, yes, keep going. Yes, this will resolve. Yes, he's coming. You held space for his healing like it was part of your spiritual assignment. You forgave his running, again and again, because you believed love was supposed to be patient and spiritual connection was supposed to be tested. You convinced yourself that your love alone could bridge the gap between where you are and where you are meant to be. And underneath all of that, there was a belief quiet, persistent, and exhausting. If you loved hard enough, healed deep enough, held the vision clearly enough, he would wake up and meet you there. So you worked on yourself like it was a lever you could pull. You refined your energy. You regulated your emotions. You stayed high vibe. You tried to become so aligned, so steady, so surrendered, that the universe would have no choice but to bring him into coherence with you. But what no one tells you is this: when you try to do the universe's job with human effort, it drains you in a way sleep cannot fix. Because it isn't just tiredness, it's spiritual overextension. It's the fatigue of trying to control divine timing with emotional labor, the fatigue of trying to hold an outcome together with devotion, the fatigue of staying emotionally available to a connection that keeps asking you to carry more than your share. And now your soul is finally saying, enough. Enough translating silence into meaning. Enough calling inconsistency a phase. Enough holding space for someone who has not yet chosen to hold it with you. Enough believing that your endurance is what makes this sacred. Enough living as if your love has to perform miracles to be worthy. This is the beginning of the sacred collapse, because the part of you that kept compensating is dissolving. The part of you that kept reaching, fixing, buffering, and explaining is finally letting go. Not because you stopped loving, not because you failed, but because something deeper has awakened. The truth that love is not meant to cost you your life force. Initiation is not gentle. It doesn't always feel spiritual. Sometimes it feels like falling apart, like confusion, like grief, like emptiness, like you don't recognize yourself. But what is actually happening is this: you are being pulled out of the illusion that your effort controls the outcome. You are being returned to the truth that divine timing cannot be forced, only honored. And you are being guided into a new kind of power, one that doesn't come from holding on tighter, but from finally releasing what was never yours to carry alone. This is not the end of you. This is the end of the version of you who believed love must be proven through suffering. The sacred collapse begins because the universe is not removing your wings. It is removing the weight you were never meant to fly with. Section 3. When your body says enough. The dark night doesn't begin when something outside of you breaks. It begins when something inside of you can no longer hold. It begins when your body cannot carry the weight anymore, when your chest feels heavy in a way no deep breath can fully soften, when your heart is too tired to keep hoping, and your mind cannot make sense of one more mixed signal, one more confusing moment, one more cryptic dream that leaves you searching for meaning at the edges of your sleep. Because at a certain point, your soul doesn't need more signs. Your nervous system needs relief. And that is the shift that changes everything. You look in the mirror, and you don't recognize the woman staring back. Not because you lost your beauty, or your power, or your worth, but because she has spent so long being strong for everyone else that she forgot what her own face looks like when it is not performing strength. You forgot what your eyes look like when they aren't scanning for clues. You forgot what your shoulders feel like when they aren't bracing. You forgot what it's like to exist without constantly managing the emotional atmosphere of a connection. So when the collapse comes, it feels personal. It feels like failure. It feels like you are giving up. But you're not weak. You are finally ready to stop pretending you must be strong in ways that deplete you. This is the part of the journey people romanticize, but rarely understand. Because the real dark night isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the moment you realize you can't keep negotiating with your own exhaustion. It's the moment you realize you've been surviving a dynamic that required you to constantly compensate for imbalance. And your body, the part of you that never lies, finally says, enough. This is when your system withdraws before your mind fully catches up. Your mind might still want to understand. Your mind might still want closure. Your mind might still want the story to resolve in a way that makes all the waiting feel meaningful. But your body is done waiting. Your body stops reaching, stops scanning, stops bracing for disappointment, stops preparing for the next emotional swing. Not because you stopped loving, but because your nervous system is done buffering emotional imbalance. And divine feminine, that is not coldness. That is clarity. The silence that rises in you now is not a strategy. It is consequence. It is what happens when your system no longer has the energy to keep translating inconsistency into hope. The distance you create is not a tactic. It is what happens when your inner world finally refuses to be stretched beyond its capacity. Because for so long, you were the stabilizer. When he pulled away, you stayed emotionally present. When he went quiet, you kept the connection warm. When he avoided truth, you held space for potential. When reality hurt, you tried to out-spiritualize the pain. But the dark night begins when your body refuses to play that role anymore. It begins when your heart can no longer try harder. When your spirit can no longer stay open at your own expense. When your nervous system stops cooperating with a pattern that has been draining you in slow motion. And this is the moment the sacred truth becomes unavoidable. You were never meant to carry a two-person connection alone. So if you are here, if your body is shutting down the striving, if your emotions are flattening into quiet, if your hope feels like it has finally reached its limit, don't panic. This is not you losing your path. This is your path becoming honest. This is your system choosing integrity over endurance. This is the beginning of a new kind of strength, one that does not perform, one that does not chase, one that does not sacrifice itself to keep love alive. Because real love does not require you to disappear inside it. And the moment your body says enough is the moment your soul begins returning to you. Picture this. You wake up and your phone is silent. And for the first time you don't feel that familiar spike, no racing heart, no urge to check the last message, no impulse to replay yesterday's conversation in your head like a detective. You make coffee, and instead of mentally rehearsing what you should say to fix the connection, you notice how tired your hands feel, how tight your jaw has been for months, how your stomach has been living in knots like it's been waiting for bad news every day. Later, a song comes on that used to feel like a sign, and normally you would spiral. What does this mean? Is the universe telling me he misses me? Should I reach out? But now your body doesn't follow the old script. There's a quiet pause, almost like your system steps back and says, I'm not doing that anymore. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of self-protection. You still love him, but you no longer abandon yourself to prove it. And that's the moment listeners need to understand. The dark night isn't always dramatic heartbreak. It can look like a calm morning where your nervous system finally refuses to keep paying the emotional bill for a dynamic that never learned how to meet you halfway. Section 4. When the signs disappear. Have you noticed how, in this season, the signs don't just slow down, they seem to vanish? The repeating numbers that used to follow you everywhere, the songs that felt like direct messages, the synchronicities that used to hit so perfectly you couldn't ignore them, suddenly it all goes quiet. And that quiet can feel terrifying. It can feel like the universe has stopped responding, like the spiritual conversation you relied on has been cut off without warning. Even your prayers can start to feel different here. You pray the way you always have, but it's like your words rise up, hit a ceiling, and drop back down unanswered. And if you're honest, what that triggers isn't just sadness. It's a deeper fear. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm being punished. Maybe I'm being abandoned. A grief can form around the silence, because your mind tries to make sense of the absence, the only way it knows how, by assuming the absence means rejection. But I want you to hear this clearly. The universe is not abandoning you, it is redirecting you. Because as long as you need something outside of you to keep confirming what you already feel inside of you, you will keep handing your power away. When you depend on signs to regulate your certainty, you create a spiritual dependency, one where your nervous system can't relax unless you get evidence, one where you can't trust your own inner knowing unless life keeps sending you reassurance. And in the twin flame path, especially in the dark night, this becomes a trap. Not because signs are bad, not because synchronicities are fake, but because your relationship to them can quietly become a form of emotional outsourcing. You start scanning your world the way you used to scan your connection. You look for numbers the way you look for messages. You interpret lyrics the way you interpret his silence. You wait for the universe to tell you what to believe, because without that external confirmation, you feel exposed, unprotected, alone with your own uncertainty. And that is exactly why the dark night strips external validation. It removes what you used to lean on, not to punish you, but to return you to yourself. It takes away the outside voices, the constant signals, the cosmic proof, because there is a deeper lesson waiting underneath all of that noise. Your knowing does not need proof. Your connection does not need his confirmation. Your worth does not need his recognition. This is where your spirituality matures. This is where faith stops being something you perform and becomes something you live. Because there is a difference, an honest, painful, life-changing difference between faith and fantasy. Faith is steady. Faith is grounded. Faith doesn't require a daily miracle to stay committed to truth. Faith can sit in the unknown without collapsing. Faith trusts the process without needing to see the outcome. It doesn't demand immediate reassurance. It doesn't need life to keep showing signs for you to keep believing in your own path. Faith says, even if I cannot see what's coming next, I will not abandon myself. Fantasy, on the other hand, is anxious. Fantasy is highly imaginative, but it is built on instability. Fantasy creates stories to soothe discomfort. Fantasy tries to turn silence into a prophecy. Fantasy fills in the gaps with romantic explanations because the nervous system doesn't want to sit in uncertainty. Fantasy keeps you emotionally attached to his potential, to the version of him you hope will arrive, to the relationship you think could happen if he would just wake up. And the dark night burns that down. Not because love is wrong, not because hope is wrong, but because fantasy keeps you bonded to pain with spiritual language. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you interpreting. It keeps you organizing your emotional life around someone else's readiness. So when the signs disappear, what's really happening is this. The universe is removing the distractions that kept you looking outward, so you finally learn to stand inward. So you finally stop outsourcing your certainty. So you finally stop needing permission to trust yourself. This is the stage where your spiritual path becomes private again, quiet, internal, intimate, where you realize the deepest guidance was never meant to be loud. The deepest truth was never meant to be proven. The deepest knowing was never meant to depend on anyone else's validation. And when the dark night has finished burning away fantasy, something remains, something pure, something calm, something unshakable. Not constant signs, not constant reassurance, but faith, faith that holds you, even when nothing around you is speaking. Section 5. Faith versus fantasy and the rewiring of you. Your body often tells the truth long before your mind is ready to accept it. That is why the exhaustion in this phase can feel so profound, so total, so unfamiliar. It is not just being tired. It is the kind of tired that reaches into your bones, the kind that doesn't lift after rest. Because what's happening isn't merely emotional, it is neurological, energetic, and deeply spiritual. Something inside you is being recalibrated. You may notice it in physical symptoms that don't seem to match your day-to-day life. Waves of grief that arrive out of nowhere, a heaviness in your chest. Moments where you cannot catch your breath, not because you're in danger, but because your nervous system is processing an inner shift faster than your mind can narrate it. Nights where sleep feels impossible, even though you are bone tired. A strange restlessness, a quiet agitation, like your body is searching for something it can't name. And in one sense, it is. Because your nervous system is learning to live without the old emotional scaffolding. It is unlearning patterns that once kept you tethered, patterns of seeking reassurance, scanning for signs, attaching to potential, building stories to soften uncertainty. At the same time, your energy field is purging what is no longer aligned with your highest truth, not as punishment, as purification, not as breakdown, as reconfiguration. This is why it can feel like you're falling apart when you are actually being rewired. Every tear releases an old story, not just about him, but about you, about what love is supposed to feel like. about what you have to endure to be chosen, about the kind of emotional labor you learn to call loyalty. Every tear loosens a thread of identity that was built around waiting, holding, hoping, over-functioning, and staying emotionally available even when it cost you your peace. Every sleepless night rewires your consciousness. It forces you to sit with what you used to avoid. It brings to the surface the beliefs you once buried under spiritual language. It makes you face the raw truth that you cannot think your way out of a transformation that is happening at the level of the soul and the nervous system. And every moment of emptiness, every hollow pause, every quiet afternoon where nothing excites you, every space where you don't know what to do with your hands, your thoughts, your heart, creates room. Room for the fullness that is coming, room for a new identity to take shape, room for a life that is not organized around longing. But you cannot see that yet. Right now you only feel the loss. You only feel the freefall of not knowing who you are becoming. You may feel like your old motivations don't work anymore. Like the things that used to comfort you don't land the same. Like the version of you that was always trying to figure it out is suddenly powerless. And that can be terrifying because the mind wants a plan. The mind wants certainty. The mind wants a timeline. But you are not supposed to have clarity here. You are not supposed to know exactly what is next. You are not supposed to map this phase into neat steps that make you feel safe. You are supposed to be in the void. Because the void is where creation happens. The void is not emptiness as punishment. It is emptiness as space. It is the place where the old identity dissolves completely so the new one can emerge without interference, without ego trying to control the outcome, without conditioning trying to repeat the past, without fear trying to negotiate with reality. This is why the dark night does something so radical. It removes the usual landmarks. It takes away the external signs. It takes away the emotional highs. It takes away the sense of direction you got from movement in the connection. And it leaves you here between who you were and who you are becoming. Not to torment you, to make you real, to make your faith honest. Because fantasy needs constant stimulation. Fantasy needs signs. Fantasy needs a story to keep the nervous system from feeling the terror of uncertainty. Fantasy cannot survive the void because the void refuses to perform. The void refuses to reassure. The void refuses to explain. But faith can. Faith is what learns to trust dissolution without needing to understand it. Faith is what learns to find peace in chaos. Faith is what learns that not knowing is not failure, it is transformation. It is the sacred pause where life is rewriting you from the inside out. And the deepest lesson of this stage is simple, but it will change you. Not knowing is its own kind of knowing. Because when you stop demanding clarity, you stop trying to control the process. When you stop forcing answers, you stop interrupting your own becoming. When you stop asking the void to prove that it's working, you finally allow creation to happen in the way it was always meant to, quietly, deeply, and without your old self interfering. So if you are in the void right now, take a breath and remember this. You are not lost. You are being remade. If you've made it this far, take a slow breath and honor what that says about you, because the version of you who could only survive by chasing clarity would have clicked away already. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, where have I been trying to force an answer when my soul is actually asking me to surrender into becoming? What has this void been teaching you about your nervous system, your faith, and the stories you've outgrown? I'd love to hear your experience. Share your story in the comments, even if it's messy or unfinished. And if you don't have the words yet, simply type this affirmation: I trust what is rewiring me. Section 6. While you collapse, he feels the void. Divine Feminine. While you are collapsing on the inside, while you are finally admitting how tired you are of holding it all together, something begins to happen on the other side of this connection. Not because you did something to him, not because you planned a lesson, but because your nervous system stops offering what it has been offering for far too long: emotional coverage. For a long time, your energy was a constant in his field, even when he went quiet, even when he avoided the deeper conversations, even when he disappeared into distance, distractions, or silence. Your presence kept reaching, your heart kept holding space, Your faith kept believing in him, sometimes more than he ever believed in himself. And it wasn't malicious on his part. It was unconscious. This is what runners often do. They don't necessarily take because they want to harm you. They take because your light feels like relief. Your steadiness feels like safety. Your emotional availability becomes a cushion that prevents them from having to sit with their own inner chaos. Without realizing it, he started relying on your energy as emotional scaffolding. When he felt fear, you softened it. When he felt shame, you translated it into, "He's just wounded." When he felt unworthiness, you doubled your love. When he felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of intimacy, your patience gave him room to avoid choosing. Your energy buffered him. It held the emotional field together even when he wasn't participating. In a strange way, your devotion became the reason he could delay his own healing, because the connection still felt alive without him doing the work to truly meet it. But now something has changed. Now you have pulled back not as a strategy, but as a consequence. Not to punish him, but because you can no longer abandon yourself in the name of destiny. You are no longer emotionally available in the same way. You are no longer stabilizing the bond with your presence alone. And that absence is not subtle to him. It lands in his body like a missing frequency, a silence where warmth used to be, a space where he was used to feeling your reach. He feels the void. And it is uncomfortable, not dramatic uncomfortable, because for the first time, there is nothing in the field that makes his avoidance feel safe. There is nothing cushioning the emotional impact of his distance. There is no energetic bridge being built from your side to keep him from falling into himself. The void becomes undeniable, and it begins to shake something foundational inside him. At first, he may not even understand what he is feeling. He may not say, "I miss her." He may not suddenly become emotionally articulate. What he feels is more raw than that. Restlessness, irritation, a strange emptiness, a sense that something is missing, but he cannot name it. His usual internal autopilot doesn't work the way it used to, because the emotional environment around him has changed. So he may do what he has always done. He might reach for the usual distractions, work, social plans, other people, old habits, entertainment, anything that keeps him from feeling the quiet. He might try to replace the sensation with noise. He might try to outrun the discomfort with productivity, but nothing lands the way it used to. Nothing truly settles him, because what he is feeling isn't actually about you being gone. It is about him finally having space. Space to feel what he has been running from. When your energy was constantly holding, soothing, translating, and believing, it created a kind of emotional insulation. It protected him from the full weight of his own inner reality. But now that insulation is gone. And what rises to the surface is not romance, it is truth. His pain, his fear, his unworthiness. The old wounds he never wanted to name. The parts of him that feel inadequate, exposed, or incapable of real intimacy. The places where he has been avoiding himself for years, sometimes his whole life. This is why the void is so powerful. It does not just make him miss you, it forces him to meet himself. And that is the beginning of his awakening. Not as a beautiful spiritual moment, not as a sudden confession, but as discomfort that won't go away, as a haunting sense that his old patterns no longer work, as emotional pressure that builds because there is no longer a divine feminine presence buffering the consequences of his avoidance. While you collapse, he feels the void, and the void becomes the doorway. Because when you stop carrying the connection alone, you don't destroy love. You remove the emotional anesthesia. You stop making it easier for him to stay asleep. And in that new silence, uncomfortable, honest, unavoidable, he begins, for the first time, to feel what he has been running from all along. Section 7. The Masculine's Awakening, the Shift to Divine Love, and what union really is. Divine Feminine. If you are watching him from a distance and wondering why he can love you and still run, you have to understand what he is running from. It is not always you. Sometimes it is the very parts of himself he was never given permission to have. His conditioning runs deep. From boyhood, he was taught directly or indirectly that feelings are weakness, that vulnerability is danger, that softness makes him lose respect. He learned that value is earned through what he can do, what he can provide, what he can accomplish, what he can control. So he became a performer of strength instead of a participant in intimacy. He learned to achieve instead of connect, to manage instead of surrender, to keep his heart behind systems, titles, routines, and distance, because distance felt safer than being seen. But union is not a performance. Union is not chemistry. It is not longing, obsession, or spiritual fascination. Union is the moment the masculine can no longer hide behind the version of himself that survives, because union requires him to feel what he was trained to suppress. It requires him to be emotionally present in ways that cannot be faked. It requires him to surrender control and trust something he cannot measure, prove, or logically dominate. And this is why your withdrawal matters not as a tactic, but as an energetic truth. When you withdraw your energy, he loses the buffer that made avoidance comfortable. For a long time, your love was not just love, it was emotional stabilization. Your faith in him softened the consequences of his disconnection. Your willingness to hold the field kept the bond alive, even when he wasn't truly meeting it. And without even realizing it, he could keep running because your energy made the connection feel warm enough to avoid fully losing it. But when you turn inward, when your energy is no longer reaching outward to hold him, his soul has a clearer channel to speak. And it speaks in the only ways that bypass the masculine mind. It speaks through tension he cannot release, no matter how much he works or distracts himself. It speaks through exhaustion that sleep does not fix, because this tiredness is not physical, it is emotional and spiritual depletion. It speaks through an ache in his chest with no logical source, like grief without a story. It speaks through dreams where you appear in silence, not to beg him, not to chase him, but simply to exist as a truth he can't talk himself out of. It speaks through synchronicities that interrupt him, a song that stops him mid-step, numbers that follow him like a quiet insistence, emotions that rise out of nowhere, sadness, longing, regret, fear, feelings he does not know how to name, because he has spent years translating emotion into anything else. Irritation, numbness, busyness, control. At first, he rationalizes it. He calls it stress. He calls it coincidence. He tells himself it's just a phase, just life, just pressure. But the signs keep coming. The sensation keeps returning. And slowly, something begins to become undeniable. Running is not creating distance anymore. It is creating pain. This is where the awakening begins, not as a clean spiritual storyline, but as a messy internal unraveling. 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Clarity followed by denial. A pull toward you followed by panic. The desire to reach out followed by the fear of what reaching out would require. Presence, accountability, vulnerability, emotional consistency. Because ego does not die quietly. His ego will fight for the old identity, the one that feels safe, controlled, unaffected, the one that wants love without exposure, the one that wants connection without responsibility. So you may see contradiction, you may feel the push-pull, you may feel his internal war leaking into the dynamic, but beneath the noise, his soul remembers you. He feels your absence like a phantom limb, not because you are missing in a dramatic way, but because your energy used to hum in the connection like a constant signal. He notices the silence where your reaching used to be. He senses that you have changed, and that shift unsettles him because when you were chasing, he could run and still feel in control of the distance. But now you have turned inward, and there is nowhere to hide. This is the paradox that so many divine feminines have to accept, because it is both painful and liberating. His awakening cannot happen until you stop trying to awaken him. His journey toward you cannot truly begin until you stop journeying toward him. Because the dynamic is a mirror, and when you embody wholeness, when you stop offering your nervous system as a home for his avoidance, you change the frequency. You stop vibrating in longing, waiting, hoping, and proving. You move into alignment, self-respect, and truth, and frequency calls to its match. This is where divine love begins. Divine love is not attachment. It is not obsession. It is not losing yourself in a connection and calling it fate. Divine love is the love that includes God within you, meaning it includes your dignity, your boundaries, your nervous system, your self-worth, your clarity. It is love that does not require self-abandonment to be real. And what union really is not simply two people coming together. Union is two whole beings meeting without betrayal of the self. It is emotional responsibility. It is mutual participation. It is a connection that can hold truth without collapse, intimacy without manipulation, vulnerability without punishment, and love without sacrifice of your own soul. So if you are in this phase, let this land gently but clearly. Your job is not to chase him into awakening. Your job is to become so aligned with your own wholeness that your life no longer revolves around his readiness. Because when you embody that, you don't force union. You become the frequency that only truth can meet. Divine Feminine, the dark night was never a detour. It was the sacred passage that rewired your soul, strengthened your nervous system, and changed the energetic field between you in the only way that truly lasts through embodiment, not effort. Because when you walk through the void long enough, something in you stops begging life to prove your worth. The desperation dissolves. The hunger for reassurance fades. The obsession with timelines loosens its grip. And in that quiet, a deeper truth rises not as an idea, but as a lived knowing. You are already whole. You are already worthy. You are already love itself. And this doesn't come from staying positive. It comes from surviving what you thought would destroy you and realizing it didn't. It comes from sitting in emptiness until you understand emptiness is not punishment, it is space. Space where illusions die. Space where attachments fall away. Space where your true self finally has room to breathe again. You lose what you thought defined you, and then you discover something holy. You still exist. You are still here. More real than ever. That is the real victory. Because once you reach this stage, you begin to feel him without needing to reach. You can love him without needing a specific response. You can honor the connection without bargaining for proof. You can hold the frequency of union without gripping the question of when or how. And that is where human love transforms into divine love. Human love says, "Tell me I'm safe." Divine love says, "I am safe inside myself." Human love says, "Choose me so I can relax." Divine love says, "I choose myself, and I bless what is meant for me." Divine love does not deny longing. It simply refuses to abandon self-respect to satisfy it. It says, "I see you, I honor you, I trust what is meant will unfold in perfect timing." And here is the deepest teaching of the dark night, one that your ego could never accept, but your soul now understands. Peace is possible with either outcome. Because union was never meant to be a cage you live inside while waiting for him to become ready. Union is your journey home, to yourself. Union is becoming so steady, so clear, so spiritually anchored, that whether he acknowledges anything or remains silent, you carry the truth within you. You stop treating his behavior as the final verdict on your value. You stop letting his readiness decide your destiny. You stop asking the connection to compensate for the places you once doubted yourself. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. And yes, some nights still feel heavy. Some moments still ache. The 3 a.m. hours can feel like the universe has gone quiet on purpose. But even there, you are not alone. Those hours are not empty. They are instructional. They are initiation. So now, ask yourself a better question. Not, where is he? Not, when will he return? Ask, who am I becoming in this darkness? Ask, what wisdom is hidden in this emptiness? Ask, what truth can I finally hear now that the noise is gone? Because the dark night is not keeping you from union. It is the pathway to it. Every breath you take through uncertainty, every tear that cleanses you, every attachment that falls away moves you deeper into the love that you are. And when you stop chasing love and start being love, something profound happens. You become the temple, the frequency, the invitation. On the other side, you don't just find the light, you become it. And when you become the light, you don't need anyone to find you. You shine so brightly that what is meant for you is drawn into your orbit, not because you are trying, but because you are being love, being whole, being the divine feminine in full embodied power. That is the real magic. That is the real victory. Now, if this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, I want you to anchor it with intention. Leave a comment clearly stating a specific quote, so your nervous system hears you choose yourself, and your soul records this as a turning point. And don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and watch the video below, because what comes next is not about waiting for union. It's about becoming the kind of woman who no longer abandons herself for love,